Hey, welcome back to Analog Man Podcast. Please do me a favor, hit that like button on the way in. Today we're going to do a song called Martirio, which means martyr. So I probably didn't pronounce that right, but that was the best I could do. This is another song in Spanish, and I did Narcisista, which I really, really enjoyed that one. This is another live. I'm going to be doing live mostly for the warning, at least in the beginning, just because it just really shows you just how talented these girls are. But let's go.
Cosas obvias son las más difíciles de ver. Te asfixiaste con tus propias manos. Cuando todo apunta que por fin alguien te viene a rescatar, te encuentras nuevamente abandonado. En tu martirio es tu destino, entrégate. Intentas buscar explicación en lo profundo de tu ser y vuelves a caer en el vacío. Al fin te das cuenta en secreto que el dolor se quedará. Será tu nueva vida de martirio. Ya no hay vuelta atrás, no puedes escapar del fuego a tus pies. Y en la oscuridad te perderás. En tu martirio es tu destino,
Should I stop? No.
a veces las cosas obvias son las más difíciles de ver. En tu martirio es tu destino, entrégate. Aprende de los que sufrieron, si hay que vivir en miedo, es mejor morir en manos de un adiós. Tu vida triste, mártir tonto, día mío. Buenas noches, Ciudad de
Whoa. Again. Man, I'm really starting to love these girls. Let me just start this first. Before I get into it, please hit the subscribe if you haven't already. But I want to address this one idiot who left a comment. Okay, so I'm going to put that comment up right here, and I want you guys to read this. Now, I wasn't sure if I was going to address it because sometimes, when people say stuff in the comments, whatever, I just let it go. But when this guy said this, I decided to put this up there. I think he was just trolling me, and it was on my last video, the Gen Z video. If you want to go check, if you want to blast him in the comment section, go ahead. Feel free. Just keep it, keep it holy. But first of all, your stupid comments, man. Um, I just want to address the very first part of that, which is they're a mariachi band. Well, what's wrong with being a mariachi band? That's what I want to start out with. Is there something wrong with being a mariachi band? Because that part of it flew over my head. So whatever that joke was supposed to be, or whatever insult that was supposed to be, that's not an insult. Obviously they're a rock and roll band. It's pretty obvious. But if they were a mariachi band, why would that be a bad thing? You moron. Yeah, you probably wouldn't say this to my face or to anybody else's face. You just troll inside the comment section. Normally I don't get mad about stuff like that, but just an idiot. So go ahead and blast him. Go ahead. So moving on from that. Anyway, I shared these girls with my youngest the other day, and usually when Dad's like, check out a band or whatever, she doesn't want to listen to me because she has her own music and she doesn't want to like the same music as her dad. Although we do share a love for reggae and calypso and stuff like that. So I was like, for just the fact that these girls are close to their age and how much they've accomplished, if you want a role model for a young girl, these girls are the type of role model you want. You want girls that are showing you what they can do on a stage like this and how hard they work to get there. And they're not doing anything like as a father that I wouldn't be proud of. So, I showed it to her and she came back to me later in the afternoon, like I was just like talking about the warning, and she's like, Dad, they're really good. I was like, yeah, yeah, I think they are. So I'm sure she's gonna start checking out a little bit more of their music. So I did this reaction on this song in particular, one because the idiot in the comment section said that. So I was like, you know what? I'll just do this song. How about that? How do you like them apples? So I was gonna do this anyway. I just wanted to hear another version of a Spanish song, and I chose this one. This one was about martyrdom, and I did see the lyrics. I had the lyrics going. They were very small, so kind of hard for me to see, But I caught a little bit of glimpse of what they're talking about there, and it seemed like something a little bit about self-inflicted wounds and your own problems, and kind of you know I don't really know exactly because I'd have to listen to it again because it was in Spanish and then have to read it again. But I kind of took from it that where there was just, there's part of everybody's journey where we have a self-inflicted wound that we just have to live with and struggle with. So maybe that's what it was. Not quite sure exactly what the sentiment was. So hopefully you guys will explain that to me in the comment section for me and for others who don't know. That would be a really interesting one to talk about. The song was awesome. Again, Danny, just with her guitar. I mean, you can even hear the backup from Ale. Her voice was a little bit stronger on this, and Pal just being Pal, just rocking the drums, singing back there in her element. I was just thinking, these three, it just sounds, it's a perfect little rock song, like wasn't long, wasn't drawn out, but it packed a powerful punch, and it had that kind of a really, like a choir sound to it. The audience really seemed to know it. I guess it's popular, and I could see myself running at night with this song on my headphones. Maybe that's my new nighttime running song. I think it's kind of got that vibe to it. I kind of liked it. So yeah, I'll check this one out. Add this one to the playlist for sure. What do you guys think? You guys like this one? Who thinks this is their favorite song? Go ahead and put that in the comment section. Everybody has a different flavor, and like you guys said, almost everything they create is a great song. So it's kind of hard to choose, really, right? So I haven't made my choice, but right now I would have to say Dull Knives is kind of like up there, up there for me, especially because I had the two songs together. That experience was like, whoa, whoa, whoa! These girls, they're something else. But I haven't heard a lot of their music, so there's more to come. There's more to come, and you're gonna come back here for that for sure because I'm gonna keep making reactions with the warning for a while. And today I was gonna take a day off, but I decided, you know what? No, I could do at least one today, one reaction. Who should I do? I should do the warning. Which song should I do? Well, I chose this song because of, that ignoramus in my comment section. But also, this is the other reason why I was going to do the song originally. Was when I asked in I think it was in my last video, the one before, I was asking folks who were Mexican American or from Mexico, like, we're just talking about how rock and roll is a really popular genre. And of course, it's popular in the United States, rock and roll comes from the US. It's popular in other places like England and all over the world. And a lot of times, in Europe and stuff, they like some of our American music more than we do, especially in this generation. But I was just thinking about like this goes way back for Mexican Americans in Mexico. This goes way back, and I only know what I know from my life experience. And I was just thinking, like growing up, I was on the East Coast, so rock and roll in my neighborhood, people listen to rock and roll, but it was more of like hip hop, R&B, especially if you're like from minority communities or, in those type of neighborhoods where I grew up. Most people listen to hip hop and R&B. That was just what people listened to. In that area, we had a lot of Puerto Rican folks who would listen to hip hop and R&B, but also listen to their own, you know, local music from back in Puerto Rico. And so for the Mexican Americans in that area, which when I grew up, it wasn't that predominant. There was certainly some families, but not like the same as like maybe in Texas or in California. But there were still plenty of folks on the East Coast, right? And the Mexican American kids I grew up with, it would be interesting because you'd have, say be like a family of five or something, right? You'd have like three of the brothers or two of the brothers and the sisters. They all like listen to R&B and hip hop because that's what people listen to in that area that I lived in. But there was always like one brother who was just hardcore metal. And that guy would always wear like a Megadeth t-shirt or a Metallica or these bands like most of us didn't even know any songs to. And it was just a thing. And it was funny, the way they would dress would be, a black t-shirt with the band on it. They would have black jeans on that were tight, right? And just like, some type of leather something, whether it was a leather belt or a chain wallet or boots, there was some other leather. And that was it. And there was always one guy that was like that. And I always was thinking like, where does this come from? Why do you guys always like this kind of music, right? And it seemed odd in the neighborhood, but we still got along fine, right? It was just kind of like that's what it was, These Mexican Americans love heavy metal. And so growing up, I just thought, well, maybe that's just something that folks from that culture like about, the United States. They like this kind of music. And I didn't really think too much about it, that it was actually as prevalent as, you know, my experiences were showing me because at that point I hadn't traveled around the United States. I didn't know. I thought it was just like right there locally. But as I traveled around the US, I said, okay, yeah, well, I mean, it's still a thing, they really love. And of course, yeah, we're neighbors, in Central America and South America are neighbors to the United States, so it's easy to export music and those types of things. But I don't think like, Canada had the same type of love and loyalty to those types of bands that Mexican Americans had, at least in my view. I could be wrong, but it just wasn't the same. And it's so funny because the clothing attire that they used to wear back then, the rockers, we used to call them, folks, just like that, we called them the rockers. Like in high school, there was different groups, and oh, those are the rockers. Or they're smoking cigarettes. They have their headphones on, and they have their skinny jeans and black jeans on. But today, like it's like the rappers are all hip hop guys are wearing the same kind of clothes that those guys wore back then. It's just, everything goes full circle, I guess. And yeah, a lot of cool friends that were in those circles, and I maintained good relationships with all of them. I was one of those guys I just always like to have good friends at least every circle, at least one. So I, had a good relationship with so many folks that like I kind of knew what was going on, and people had my back and I had their back. So yeah, that was kind of the thing. The smoking tree, the rockers would all hang out, and there was white guys there with them too, as like long hair, and they had the headbangers ball, and they used to talk about the countdown while the other guys were talking about Yo MTV Raps and BET. They had their, kind of the hip hop countdown. So those two things were kind of going on either at the same time or like right after. And some people like listen to both, right? And I think most people listen to a little bit of both, but then it started to get like too heavy. Some of the stuff be like, all right, that's not for me, or too much, this hip hop stuff's like too much of this. And so everybody kind of had whatever flavor they like. But I just always wondered about that, how all that came to fruition, organically, through just association in the US. But I asked this comment and I got some really good feedback from some folks. And I really appreciate that. Now, someone did make a comment about anthropology and say, well, you just put the dots together, this, and anthropology doesn't really work that way. You actually do ethnography, which is you let other people tell you what they think about their own culture. You don't try to write it down or make assumptions or stuff. So that's kind of what I did with that question. I just wanted to see what folks think about, like how they came across it, how it built up inside their communities and from their perspective. So the first thing that came back, which I thought was really cool because it kind of jogged my memory and it was something like in plain sight, but I was just like, didn't never think about it, I'm just being honest. One person was like, Mexican Americans in Mexico have been a part of rock and roll since the beginning, and it has continued to grow since then. And guys like Richie Valens and, Santana, those were, you know, instrumental in rock music at the time. And I was like, you know what? I didn't even think about Richie Valens, which I know his story and, obviously watched the movie La Bamba. And I know all the music, but Oh Donna, I used to sing that song, man. Oh Donna. Oh, I won't go through the whole thing. Maybe at the end of the podcast, I'll try and sing my best version of that. But, he was rock and roll back at the same time of, Elvis and all those guys that were Buddy Holly and all that. So, yeah, since the beginning, ever since, as they say. But somehow it maintained a root and it developed in some ways even more than some areas. And so, what else was there to that? I got another comment. This person kind of gave me an idea of like what was going on in Mexico, which I didn't know. So, I guess the Mexican government had banned rock and roll for many, many years. And I don't know, I believe she said up until the 90s. I don't know if that's true. Let me know if that was true or not. But there was basically a kind of a ban on rock and roll. And you know how things are when you ban them, people are even more interested in them. And it was a little bit of a rebellion, perhaps, that underground rock and roll musicians were kind of, fighting back against the system, so to speak. And that created that deeper connection with something that they were being told that they couldn't have, a freedom of expression, but also rock and roll and just the spirit of rock and roll. She gave me a bunch of bands in Mexico, which I'm going to check out, several that were instrumental in rock music in Mexico, which I don't really know about, but perhaps like the Warning they know about or their parents know about, or people in Mexico know about, and they're probably same people that love hard rock in United States. So that was really interesting to me because there's this whole scene that was going on that I'd never heard of before, right? So that was probably still going on when I was growing up, and why those kids like rock and roll so much because of their parents' influence as well. So there was other ties there that I wasn't seeing, and I thought that was really cool, that comment. And then the last comment that I got, which really made a lot of sense as well, because I kind of remember these specific moments, which was, and it was mostly, it was more on the West Coast, which makes more sense, right? But right around the time, like hip hop, you remember Walk This Way when that was like Run DMC came together with rock and roll? That was a huge deal. People were like, rock and hip hop together, which it's just commonplace now, right? But that was like, whoa, everything was. That's the first time this has ever happened. It was like, the UFC when karate and boxing went against each other. No one had ever seen it in the flesh, and there were other musicians at the time like Ice-T, who was mixing that kind of music from that perspective, as well as Cypress Hill. And I think there may have been some others that he mentioned, but I did remember those two in their communities in Los Angeles as well, that like kind of took their rap and was actually doing rock and roll in it as well. And they were like the first to really do it, besides Aerosmith and Run DMC. But those groups were actually earlier than everybody else who was actually thinking about doing that. So there's a little bit of history in that, and there's a deep rooted appreciation of rock and roll by Mexican Americans and by people in Mexico. And that's why, hey, your little comment, I just thought I'd address that. And I think I just did. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm going to rub people a little bit wrong about, my perceptions, but I'm just giving you what I thought from my perspective at the time. And I'm not saying I had the greatest perspective. I'm just saying that's what my perspective was. You only know what you know, you only know what you're exposed to. And so when you get exposed to new things, your perspective changes, right? So that's why I like doing this podcast because it's about learning new things. The warning is new for me. And look what I'm learning, and people are putting in the comments things that I would have never thought about. And it's really cool. I really appreciate that. I hope I bring up some things that maybe you haven't thought about, especially if you're younger and you're like, oh, I didn't know that, or, I haven't even heard of that. I'll go check it out. And occasionally that happens, like when I was just talking about a band, it was a Japanese female band called Baby Metal. And I had noticed a sound that they had. And to me, that sounded a lot like a band called Mad Capsule Markets, pronounced Mad Capsule Marketo in Japanese. And turns out the producer for both of them are related. So there was a little bit of the fans didn't know that. They went back and they checked and they were like, wow, I never heard this band before. And so they were like, hey, thanks, old head. I hate being called that, but I try to stay in the fresh genre. I try to stay in between both of those worlds, but Father Time is undefeated. So, but that's just the way it is. Speaking of undefeated, are you guys and Mexico? Are you guys going to watch this fight with Jake Paul and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.? I don't know if it's a debacle. Here's my take on this. I maybe you guys aren't fight fans, you're just music fans and the warning. So I'm sorry, but I did want to just kind of address this. When I was growing up, Julio Cesar Chavez was one of my, if not my favorite fighter. And the reason was he wasn't flashy, he didn't blow you away with his skills and all this, but the amount of heart, the amount of determination, you could see that guy. He was a warrior. And for me, that was just something you couldn't teach. And if you didn't have skills and you weren't the most talented, but if you could be a warrior who just doesn't quit, to me, that was something attainable. Like for me, like that was something I respected more than all the flashy stuff. And there was that fight, I think it was Meldrick Taylor, I believe, and it got stopped in the last round, and it was a huge deal. Richard Steele stopped it with like, I don't know, it was like 10 seconds left. Meldrick Taylor had Julio Cesar Chavez beat on every single card in almost every single round. I think every round. And right towards the end of that 12-round fight, Chavez hits him with a combination of punches and he drops him with like 30 seconds left. And Meldrick Taylor never really gains his composure and Richard Steele stops the fight. Now, the whole world calls that like the worst stoppage of all time, but that's not what I saw. That is not what I saw. And I've fought before. I've put plenty of rounds in the ring. I saw Meldrick Taylor not ready to fight, not ready to take another punch. I saw there was a few seconds left on the clock, but the clock was still running and the fight was still on. Richard Steele's job is to protect the fighter. And I saw a man who, on all accounts, was beaten easily on every round and could have quit, but he fought, and he dropped that guy with less than a few seconds left in the round. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in boxing in my life. So I'm rooting for Chavez Jr. Now, with that said, I do like Jake Paul and the way that he is using business and working around what he's trying to do to build himself. And he's put in the time and he's put in the work. He's no scrub. He can fight. He can definitely fight. Can he box like a boxer at that level? Has he put enough time in? He's put about 6 or 7 years. He's getting closer, and Chavez Jr. is getting older. So, it'll make for a tough fight, and he's a bigger guy. So I would not rule him out for sure. But that's my take on it. And I know that's not music, but I just thought I would address that since we're on some of those topics. But, back to the music and these girls, I really enjoyed this song for sure. I'm going to have to look at the lyrics a little bit more and try to understand the deeper meaning of those lyrics. A little bit hard to hear it in another language and try to read it as well. And I do all my reactions first time, not like some of these other reactors out there, even the ones that are like, now copying every song that I do. It's kind of creepy in a way. I know who they are, but whatever. It's okay. It's all good. I mean, it's out there for everybody. And so I like doing the lives. I think these girls absolutely rip live, and I want to do some more live music. I have a few more requests. I have a few that have come into the stand store and other means, and I'm definitely going to cover those for sure. And I appreciate if you guys do that. Go down the stand store and request, or you can put it in the comment section during the premieres, the live premieres. I had 40 people in my last live. Dude, super stoked, super stoked. And then in the comment section as well, I read as many as I can. I'm still getting to the bottom of those comments, right? So, you know, the man's still in the last round. He's still hanging in there like Julio Cesar Chavez, right? But maybe you guys will knock me out eventually. I've been down a few times, but I've never been out cold. I've been rattled a few times, but I've been able to regain my composure in the ring. Getting in that ring is not an easy thing to do. It's like, in some ways, it's like getting on the stage in front of all those people, right? You miss a chord, you miss something, and everybody sees it. It's your fault. It's nobody else's fault, especially if you're like the lead singer, like Danny, something goes wrong and it's like on you so heavily. But she does have her sisters to step up and, pick her up a little bit if that happens. I'm sure they've come across situations where they've just recovered. And that's part of being a real good professional too, is where you just have mistakes and then you power through it, right? And the crowd barely even realizes that there was a mistake. Unlike the Analog Man podcast, where everybody points out all my mistakes, every single one of them. There isn't a mistake that I do that doesn't get pointed out. And there's so many. So, yeah, it takes a little time to correct it. I'm trying to correct lots of things. Still, even at this age, I try to correct, right? Because life is about learning and getting better and increasing and just learning something new every day. Just one thing, whatever that is. And yeah, in my stand store, I talk about those kinds of things. I have those type of products if anybody's interested in that. Also appreciate everybody coming back to the channel. What should I cover next? Popular song, obscure song. There's a few. At some point, I'm gonna do the collab with Bandmade. I've got to do that because I've been covering some of Bandmade's music, and I've got to cover some more of their music. And that collab will be probably a good segue to do that. So, how about I do some more of The Warning first? How about I do a little bit more of that, and then maybe I'll think about the collab if I'm going to do more than one song a day. But for today, this is all I'm going to do is this video. So this will be the only one you see today. And I appreciate everybody that comes back to the channel. I appreciate everybody that has subscribed. If you haven't already and you're already at this point, please subscribe. Sometimes I look at my metrics and people are watching real long time. They forget to subscribe. They must forget because you wouldn't watch that long if you weren't, interested in what the Analog Man has to say. And I appreciate everybody that's still here listening to that. If you are, just type me in the chat so I know who the real ones are. I like to know who the real ones are. Appreciate you guys all. I'll see you guys on the next one. I am the Wolfhound, and yeah, these girls, they just continue to rock, man. They just continue.